Hello again, it's me in this weird angle. Let's get to the figure stuff. So today we're gonna be drawing the figure in graphite. And personally I will be doing it with comparative measurement using this knitting needle to measure from my screen over there. It's off screen, but I will overlay this image obviously right here next to the drawing so you can see. And yeah, we're gonna be doing comparative measurement as opposed to site size measurement. So site size meaning copying exactly the same size right next to the drawing you're making, as we saw in the bark demo. It's pretty straightforward, just put what you see on here. Comparative measurement requires a little bit of extra care. You have to actually measure multiple things to put one thing down. So we're gonna get into that a bit more here as we progress, but I'll be narrating what I do while I work. So you looked at the figure fundamentals video, and with that you should be somewhat familiar with the differences that there are in figure drawing versus the bark project. There are some different stages, like the gesture stage mostly, and should you prefer to do it that way, there will be a transfer drawing stage. So for the transfer drawing stage, if you plan to do that, you need to decide right now. You can just use any scrap piece of paper for the transfer. That way you will save on the more expensive paper. You can just use basically printer paper for this transfer. It's a sort of discardable drawing which we will then transfer to the nice paper once we have established everything accurately. So there will be no smudges or crinkles or anything like that on your final piece. And it's necessary mostly because as a beginning student you might have some issues, in the initial placement of things, especially working in this comparative way. Your guesses might be way off, by centimeters even at the start when you start putting in the head. Maybe it's over here and you have to switch the position to way right, and that might leave a little bit of a mark on there. And in the end you might end up with a nice figure drawing, but also with a very smudgy paper all around, so you might not enjoy that. So that is why we might want to make the transfer drawing. Anyways, I'm not gonna make one, this is a demonstration. I will make a separate sort of small demo for the transfer process, and you can do it in it's exactly the same process basically in graphite, charcoal and oil paint. And I'll just make a separate small video for that, making a small little transfer of something, and you can then see how it's done. Don't mind these smudges here, it's oil paint from these things that I'm propping up the panel with, and I couldn't be bothered to change that anymore since I already crinkled one paper and had to battle against a roll of paper to get this one on here. So it's not in the drawing area, so I'll just stick with this one. It's pure laziness, that's me. So let's get started. So in the start here, well, I forgot to map out this smaller plumb line at the start. So this is where we will be starting. We will look at the figure's gesture purely there and sort of solve some issues we might have with the larger drawing already in this small study. And this is a quick one, couple of minutes, and we want to just sort of map out the gesture. That's the only goal. It doesn't have to be perfect in proportion, anything like this. Yeah, we just want something a little bit like that, and we can use that sort of as a small reference for that, or you could think of it as a rehearsal round. So well, to start with the plumb line, it's a bit different from the bark. This time we didn't actually measure it too much. We just took the measurement from the side to make sure it's vertical on our panel here. That's a good practice to do. You could also use a square of some kind to just pull it across and be done with it. But on here we marked quarters and the halfway point. So now we have these 4 sections of the drawing that will be very useful, since we will be finding these halfway points and quarters on the model, and that is how we can keep things in proportion as well. It's good to have these sort of stronger points on the plumb line sort of marked out. We will be getting rid of those eventually. I've maybe marked those a little bit dark here so you can see it. It wouldn't matter too much if it was a transfer drawing, but here I might be left with some, you know, smudges on those, but we don't really mind that. We're just demonstrating here. So to start off with the plumb line placement, we need to decide. I will show you this overlay picture on here where I place the plumb line on top of the image, and that's where I'm placing the plumb line, so you can follow along where I'm sort of comparing to. On the figure in the model room, of course, you don't have this kind of overlay feature. You just have to decide where you're placing the plumb line, remember that, and then sort of work from there. The way we want to place this plumb line is somewhere central. Of course, it's probably more useful like that, since you can compare easier to the plumb line. If it's, you know, if the entire figure is on the right side of the plumb line, it's, you know, not very useful to have the plumb line over there in the first place. If it goes through many things on the figure, we can then compare where those things land on the plumb line and sort of adjust from there. So things on the live model, they tend to move. That's one of the reasons we place the plumb line in a certain spot many times. We try to look for alignments. In this picture we can see the neck is aligning with the front side of the neck is sort of aligning with the plumb line, as well as almost with the ankle at the bottom. So those are the sort of reasons I placed it there. And speaking of the ankle, it is of course anchored to the ground. On a figure it would be taped down, so the leg position would be more or less the same. Anything above, you know, the legs, it might shift around a little bit on a live model, so that's why a good anchor, you know, where the foot won't be really moving, it's very close to the ground, it doesn't really shuffle, it's, you know, marked by tape, it shouldn't move at all. So that's a strong, good plumb line position. As opposed to, you know, if we pick the left shoulder, the model might tilt one way or the other with the poses, you know, relaxing her legs, you know, switching the weight around a little bit, because it's a bit difficult to stay in exactly one position for an extended period of time. So in this way we can sort of keep at least something strong over here downwards in the picture. The neck might move a little bit as she leans, you know, in the model room. But yeah, those things are irrelevant. I'm just telling you these things in case you plan to take some figure lessons in long poses. This isn't very applicable in shorter poses, unless you want to like try just blocking in very quickly according to these quarters. But yeah, so let's get started. So to start things off with, I want to take some measurements. Even for this smaller one, I just kind of want to at least know roughly where the middle part is. So I'm trying to search that middle part. The sort of this middle kind of lands somewhere between this mole on her left glute and sort of the bottom of the buttocks there. So you know, there's this crease formed by the glute and the back of the thigh. So it sort of lands kind of smack in the middle of those 2 points, so we can use that to our advantage. And now we just kind of memorize that. So the middle is, you know, basically the crease lands below the middle point and the mole is a little bit above. The mole is of course just a detail, we don't even have to put that in, but you know, since we see it, we can use it to our advantage. And from there, since we now know the middle, we can now figure out where the quarters land. Obviously we need the middle for that. So yeah, maybe that would be at the bottom quarter, would be landing pretty close to where her legs are overlapping. So where the right calf sort of kind of cuts into the contour of the left leg. I would say that point is pretty close to a quarter. It's good to pick something, you know, fairly definite, like this point over there is actually pretty sharp. Checking it, I'm finding it's a little bit above that. So I'm finding it's more like halfway between that point and the crease of the left knee. So now we have that memorized. And on the picture I will of course be showing you where these points land, so you then can follow along as I'm processing this myself. And for the final quarter, we can take this previous quarter measurement and then take from the middle and see where that sort of lands. I'd say it's pretty much around the area where her right scapula would be. The sort of darker halftone underneath her right scapula. So that would be the top quarter mark. All right. So why do we need to map these out first? Because we start by estimating where the shoulders would be going. So I can see the plumb line is sort of cutting, you know, in this horizontal direction. Our model is sort of being split into thirds, where 1/3 lies on the left of the plumb line, and maybe 2/3, a little bit more than a third, 2/3 would be lying on the right side of the plumb line. And I want to say maybe the line would be somewhere around the third of the way up in this quarter. So maybe we end up with something like this. And I'm exaggerating the tilt of the shoulders here a little bit. This is a gesture sort of drawing. And then the hips. I'm sort of looking for where the kind of dimples would lie. Basically, this is a back pose. In the front pose, we would like to pick the sort of upper part of the pelvis for this line, which goes through the anterior superior iliac spines. These posterior butt dimples aren't exactly formed by the posterior iliac spines, posterior superior iliac spines, but that's the one we tend to use for this measurement. So we can sort of map out the top part of the pelvis for this line, because that's where the torso ends. So we can first map out the torso. The left side is underneath the arm, or the forearm rather, but it sort of lands right below the left shoulder there. And it doesn't extend as far as the right shoulder. And then we can sort of find this C curve maybe for this shape over here. Maybe that's a bit too steep, so let's just carve it in a little bit. Let's try and make it not super exaggerated. Okay, maybe that's pretty close to what we could have the torso doing there. And usually we want to sort of maintain the gesture on the other side as well, so it's gonna be something like this, you know. Okay. Now that we have the shoulders, it's a bit more easy to place the head. Well, we have the plumb line almost standing in for the front of the neck. The chin doesn't really extend all the way to the shoulder. There's a tilt to the left in the front of the head, and the highest point will be the back of the head over here. And there's a pretty much equal mass of, you know, of head on each side of the plumb line, if we want to estimate it like that. And yeah, so let's just kind of keep this as a sort of head shape. Let's just connect the neck in there, and sort of have this way. It's a bit hard to read right now, but we'll get some more information there. Just more or less that sort of mass for the head. As I said, we don't have to, you know, make this very accurate. We're not putting in the hair in this one. Or maybe we can, but not yet. So okay, now we have the upper portion sort of mapped out. The next thing we actually want to do is we want to place the feet. I'm just going to eyeball this foot, but it's a good idea to at least look for vertical alignments. You know, where does the foot end in comparison to the shoulder, for example. I'm thinking it's honestly pretty close to just kind of aligning here. Like this is the tip of the foot, kind of aligns with the acromion process of the left shoulder over here. So what we're using as the sort of strong points for our shoulders are the acromion processes, which is a sort of extension of the scapula, the bone here. So just a little tip on the landmark there. As I said, I might be mentioning quite a few anatomical things here, but I will be leaving it up to you to study that stuff on your own. There's so much good material out there that it's honestly just not worth my time to first revise it to be accurate with that stuff and then teach it from scratch to someone new to it, because honestly it's just there's so much to teach there. So, but as I said, you know, the fundamentals can be easily studied from a couple YouTube videos. I'll try to find some good ones for you to look at for free. So just kind of looking at the arm already there, but let's just place the foot, the lowest point being the heel over here. Sort of it's obviously lining up with this lowest point in the quarter that I mapped, but what I'm looking at right now is the foot is almost equal parts on each side of the plumb line. Maybe the right side is a little bit shorter. And then we just sort of place it on there. The ankle doesn't quite align with the plumb line, but it's really close. We can almost just put it in there. And I recommend you measure the foot many times, because it's honestly usually a bit larger than you would initially think. So now we have the foot placed. We'll just, I guess, toss in the other one here. I'm being way more meticulous here than you need to be. I just want to sort of give you a mini demo on the process for this stage as well here. We will just go over the same things here, but more precise in a moment. But as I said, it's, you know, a good little rehearsal. So there's a little bit of, I guess, space in between these feet. So let's just mark that out so we don't get too confused. Okay, now we have the feet. The next we want to do knees. And just want to make sure. Actually, perhaps these feet are a little bit too large, so let's just bring those back a little bit. Actually, they're quite a bit too large, I think, for this. So let's just bring it back a little bit. It's a little bit more horizontal. And the other foot. What made me think is because this other foot is still, you know, kind of in a horizontal kind of state. It's still more left than this right acromion process. You know, vertically, this line shouldn't touch the heel when I pull it down from this acromion process. So these are some things you can look at when you're working with like this. I'll just toss this in really quickly. Yeah, because I was feeling like there wasn't enough sort of space for this knee stuff in here. So just think the sort of the right knee kind of lands smack in the quarter there with the mark I placed before. It's going way too much out right now, so let's just bring it back a little bit. Somewhere like that. And yeah, maybe this other knee lands sort of a little bit higher over here to just sort of connect those. It's not really connecting too well, but here I'm actually kind of rethinking my torso gesture. Let me just actually turn it this way, since it kind of aligns better. I just want to sort of bring this down here with a straight line. So now that I think of it, actually I think the pelvis would be sort of extending a little bit more to the left than this, but it sort of remains hidden because the connecting thigh over here just extends a little bit more to the left than this shoulder. So I don't have to try to do something, you know, anatomically impossible here. That's what I was thinking with these knees before. So I just placed with some straight lines this left knee here, and perhaps we can just sort of straight line this right knee out here. It's a bit tricky, I want to say this. This left calf is sort of making me wonder like how I should actually be tackling that gesture, but maybe I feel like it's better to do it sort of curving this way, so we can sort of connect it like this. Perhaps the thigh would be going something like this. Kind of makes sense with the gesture. And the right side of the thigh is sort of just going up like that. So yeah, perhaps you can see this isn't the quickest process. You know, you've seen people sketching things like this in basically seconds on YouTube. That's the sort of gesture sketching, but those proportions can be all over the place, and that's, you know, fine. It's not really the point of the exercise in there. Here we want to sort of rehearse, and maybe for me I want to warm up a little bit. The next stage would be to place the hands and then connect those finally. Basically, one way to approach this would be also to sort of find all these you know, strong points: the head, the hands, the elbows, the knees, and then start connecting those. But I feel like it makes a lot more sense to just kind of get something to look at already, so you don't just sort of, you could do that pretty quickly and sort of find a quick gesture that way. That's a good way to just sort of, I guess, do repetitive gesture drawings, I guess, stuff like this. But this is just the way I'm gonna do it right now. So maybe the bottom of the hand lies somewhere there. It sort of overlaps with the thigh a little bit. Just get rid of a little bit of that thigh line there. So I'm placing it way too high over here, actually, since I can see the distal end of the ulna actually lands pretty much somewhere around here where the halfway mark was placed initially. So let's just bring the hand a little bit further down. It's pretty common, like, beginner mistake to sort of make the hands too small, I guess, and the limbs too short, because they just don't feel like they could be that long. Like, you know, the legs take up, basically the legs and the butt take more than half the image, which doesn't, you know, feel right initially when you start putting things down. But that's just how it is, honestly. So you just use simple straight lines for this hand placement over here. I think this is just connectable with a simple large C curve here. Don't really have to think about the elbow in this case. And the armpit almost connects to the center line over there. So And then finally we can find the elbow over here. It's probably like a little less than halfway of this quarter here, so let's just place it in there. Can sort of bring a C-curve gesture down, and then it's bent so it just goes right underneath there. Okay, final thing, there's the sort of the breast jutting out a little bit. It's in shadow, it's barely visible. Maybe we can finally see where the hair would land over here. Lands kind of with this actually aligning kind of nicely. You know, there's this C-curve with the elbow that it's creating on the drawing there, so it's a sort of a good visual element as well, since there's this kind of nice alignment thing going on. Creates a bit of flow for the drawing. Let's carve in the head a little bit. It's not in proportion. This is unnecessary, but I'm just sort of mapping things out here. Sort of a memo for myself to look at as well. Okay, I think that's, you know, it's decent enough. So this hand is maybe a little bit too long, so let's just cut it off there. It doesn't have to be, you know, beautiful, but here we are. I think this is all right.